The Beef Market Update on RealAgriculture.com with Ann Dunford is brought to you by AFSC's Cattle Price Insurance Program, Any Farms, and Gateway Livestock Exchange. So Ann, lately feed grains have definitely been on the minds of feeders. The trend has been higher. How have, in your work, how have the feeders been looking at these higher feed grain markets?
Well, of course, we've had lots of news as we've been going through the summer, and here today, for example, another USDA crop report confirming another bullish corn crop number as far as reduced carryover. They reduced the yield a little bit on this morning's report. So again, looking at smaller carryover, corn initially reacted by making a big jump up. It did end up settling the day down, but nevertheless, you're right, trend has been higher on corn. And of course, with that, we've seen U.S. feeder cattle waning a little bit in price, but at the same time, given the strength in corn, they haven't come off as much as one would think. Now, if you look at the Canadian situation, we've seen, of course, as you mentioned, feed grains moving higher, not as quickly as we've seen in the U.S., but at the same time, we've had a feeder market that's been substantially higher than the U.S. in equivalent terms, especially now that we're at a par dollar. It's a pretty easy calculation to make now.
So I've been hearing, and I'm sure you have too, there's a lot of feeders out there that are saying, oh, there's a lot of, locally and domestically, there's a lot of feed grain out there based on the summer that we had here. Mm-hmm. But that may not be, that is true, but there also is some other issues that go with that in terms of managing the risk.
Well, exactly, and I think, again, here's the classic case of regionally, most certainly we see and we look around us. We do this often on the cattle feeding side too. You look at the neighbor's pens and your pens and they're full, so everybody must be full. Not necessarily the case, and when you take this to a North American level or to a global perspective, obviously the grain situation is tighter globally, and even though the supply of grains here in Western Canada or regionally in this part of the world are larger, we could most certainly see prices move higher just from the global pressures as we go forward. So I think, and again, who knows how fast, but if you've got inventory of cattle on feed, I mean, that is most certainly a serious consideration, especially when you're looking at where your risks are going forward.
And there is an expectation that the wheat board is going to be exporting some of this feed wheat. So some of this, you know, the harvest is finished, the supplies are in, we know what the volumes are. So if the board was to export a bunch of feed grain, then we're kind of dealing with maybe a tighter supply than we first thought in terms of putting them into cattle. What about the Canadian dollar? Where are people at with that?
Well, again, I think it'll be varied. You'll find some producers out there will have taken protection, whether it was through, of course, we've got the CPIP pricing program here in Alberta that rolls everything together, Canadian dollar and basis. You've got basis contracts that here in Canada you can roll the dollar in with it, or do it on your own if you're looking at U.S. basis contracts. So I suspect there have been participants all the way through that taking advantage or putting the whole package together, cattle price and dollar as they go forward. But I suspect there's another side of the coin that where we haven't seen pricing happen, and who knows? You're right. We've very much been at a par dollar for a while now, and where it goes from here, who knows? But again, assuming that it's going to go down, I think would be the once you've bought the cattle and have the cattle on feed is kind of just maybe wishful thinking at this point in time. Do
you believe that the cattle feeder strongly believe that it's going low? It's going to go lower?
Typical. I think you could find you could talk to 3 different people and think it's going up, down, and sideways. So I honestly think that there's a lot of variation in what the belief of where the dollar trend's going to be, and rightly so. It's been a very difficult thing to predict.
Yeah. Fat cow, are we going to trade higher this week?
I think we're going to most certainly try to look for some higher prices. We've had some strong moves on the futures market, live cattle market in Chicago yesterday. Started off strong today. It lost some of that steam later in the day. But I think going forward, the U.S. cattle feeder is going to be holding pretty firm for strong prices to finish off this week. And for the Canadian perspective, we've got a very narrow basis, but I think we're in a very good position with tight fat cattle supplies right now to fight for higher prices.
So the buying 3 weeks out has trimmed down?
No, I think what's happened, of course, is packers have trimmed down their kills. So we're still sitting with pretty close to 3-week live inventory out there.
Okay, but we're pretty tight on the supply of those still?
what's being offered on a week-to-week basis is smaller. It's the smallest it's basically been this year. But having said that, again, packers have reduced their kills to the point that they're able to keep 3 weeks of inventory.
What's forcing that? Is that the fault of the retailer? Retailer's not selling enough meat, or what's?
Well, margins. So again, if the packer was going to run full out, he'd have to pay substantially more, and he's not getting it on the other side. So it's a classic supply and demand story.
Okay, Ann, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Okay, thanks, Tom.